Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me at the back? Yeah? Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. It really is a pleasure to be back to the school after so many years. I think it's a fabulous initiative, BIS Talks. We get to come back and hopefully discuss a little bit of what we've achieved and give back a little bit to the school. So the last time I stood in this spot was 30 years ago. I was standing for elections to the student government, standing to be secretary of the student government. I was incredibly nervous. I almost fainted, I remember. So hopefully I won't do a repeat performance. That won't happen today. Why investments is such a fabulous job? What does it take to succeed? And why do a lot of people, including very smart people, often fail at the investment process? So let me start with what is investing all about. Now, all your parents work very hard and they've all saved some amount of money, we hope. Unfortunately, they also have large expenditures coming up in the future. You need to finance your education, they need to buy a house, maybe they need to buy a yacht. So big expenditures coming up in the future and a quantum of savings which is less than that. So you need to invest that savings to have that savings grow over a period of time to meet these larger expenditures. Now you can invest in a variety of fashions. You can invest in real estate and hope that property prices go up over a period of time. You can invest in gold, which a lot of Indians do, but typically it's not a great investment. You can invest in a bank fixed deposit. You get 8-9%, inflation is 5-6%, so you don't make much money after that. You can invest in art. It's incredibly subjective, it's incredibly illiquid, but that's one way of doing it. And you can invest in stocks. So a little bit of a background about what is stocks. When I tell my niece that I invest in stocks, I get a very blank look. So I'll try and describe what investing is about to a greater extent. So you want this money to grow over a period of time to meet your expenditures, right? And I've highlighted there are a number of options of doing that. And one way is to invest in a stock. Investing in a stock is essentially you buy a share in a company. So you own a proportionate share of that business. So let me give you an example. You own, let's say you buy shares in Infosys. You buy 1,000 shares of Infosys. You essentially become a part owner of Infosys. So you own 0.00004% of Infosys. So what happens to Infosys over a period of time as a company? If Infosys does well, your stock does well. Infosys does badly, your stock does badly. Now this can be a very rewarding process. You guys are all, the students here are probably 12 to 15 years. In the last 12 to 15 years, stocks have given a return of between 12 and 15% per annum. Now some stocks have done fabulously well. Some have obviously not done as well in the last 15 years. So let me tell you about some stocks which have done extremely well in the last 15 years to sort of get you a little bit more excited. So I was walking into the school today and I noticed there was a Royal Enfield bike parked outside. So Royal Enfield is made by a company called Eicher Motors. Now if you had bought Eicher Motors at the time, 15 years ago, at the time of your birth, that stock has gone 700 times in the last 15 years. So 1 lakh rupee invested in Eicher Motors today would be worth 7 lakhs. So for all the dads and moms who potentially bought a motorcycle 15 years ago for 1 lakh of rupees, that motorcycle today would be worth 7 crores. So a rather expensive purchase. So just to highlight what happens over a period of time if you invest in stocks, it can be a very rewarding experience. So let me start by telling you a little bit in terms of why investing is such a fabulous job. First, you get to meet an incredible number of very smart people while doing this job. Our basic job is about investigating companies and subsequently investing in them. So as part of this investigation, we go out and we meet the managements of these companies. You get to meet the CEOs, the owners of these businesses, and you get to ask them pretty much any question that comes to your mind. And it's not just CEOs, you meet people all the way down the company. You get to meet CEOs, promoters, plant managers, and so on and so forth. I remember I was 26 when I started this business. And as a young 26-year-old, I got to meet some of India's great CEOs, the Narayan Murthys of the world. And I was absolutely clueless. But at 26, I was sitting there and pretty much asking them anything that came to my mind. At that time, I heard one investor asking the CEO, what keeps you up at night? I thought that was a very interesting question. So I spent the next 6 months asking every CEO I met what kept them up at night. Not the best way of starting. So you get to meet a lot of fabulous people. You also get to travel a lot. You get to travel both within India, outside of India, meeting companies, analyzing industries. And it's not just about going to fancy offices. We do all kinds of work. We obviously go to the corporate offices and meet senior personnel, but we also do a lot of ground research. We meet distributors, wholesalers. So to give you an idea, we invested in a company called VIP several years ago. Not the people who make banyans, but the people who make luggage. We met the company and they said, we've got this fabulous product, you should do extremely well over a period of time. And the companies always give you a positive spin, right? So we said, let's go and do some on-the-ground research. So we went and we actually met the mom and pop shops which were selling these bags. And we discovered the product range was doing extremely well. So we bought into VIP and it was a fabulous investment. We did 10x of our money over the next 4 or 5 years. So investment is a fabulous profession because you get to meet incredibly smart people, you get to travel all over the country, big towns, small villages, you get a real feel for what is happening in India. But I think what is the most remarkable part about investing is you don't have to be the smartest person in the room to be really good at your job. This is not a business about smarts. So what is it about? This is actually a business about having good character and good temperament. You won't imagine it because finance is typically associated with being a very analytical job. You want to be good at maths, you want to be good at analysis. Let me tell you, I was terrible at math. I was terrible at math throughout school. I was terrible at math at college, and I was a finance major. So let me tell you, what are the characteristics that help you be a good investor? The first and most important in my mind is to be contrarian. So what does it mean to be contrarian? It means to have an independent thought process. It means to be able to go against the grain. So when everybody is buying, you typically want to be selling. And when everybody is selling, you typically want to be buying. And why is that? When everybody is buying, a stock becomes very expensive. And vice versa, when everybody is selling, the stock is ignored, it's very cheap. And it's not always easy to do because everybody is moving in one direction and we're trying to move in the other. Again, a few examples. I remember the top of the IT bubble in 2000. Everybody was rushing to buy IT companies like it was all going to end. Wipro at that time became such a large market capitalization that Mr. Premji became the second richest man in the world. Too much, too soon. It was the right time to sell. It wasn't easy. Everybody was saying these companies can grow at 100% for the next 100 years. But it took a lot of guts and it takes a lot of conviction. So you have to be contrarian. You have to have an independent mindset. 17 years later, Wipro is exactly the same price it was 17 years back. So it would have been a sensible decision. Conversely, on the other side, when people sell stocks. So I remember 6 years ago, Hindustan Lever, the people who make our soaps and toiletries, was highly ignored. There was a lot of concern about competition from unorganized sector, smaller players. And the stock had languished, beaten down. Nobody wanted to buy it. Had you gone and bought Hindustan Lever 5 years ago at its bottom, that stock would have given you a return of 5x from there. So being contrarian is an incredibly important part of this job. It's not about being smart, it's about having the character to go out and think independently. Equally important is to be patient. So investing is a little bit like cricket. The good batsmen don't try and hit every ball for a 4 or a 6. You guys are all used to 20-20, so in that format everybody's trying to hit every single ball for a 4 and 6, but in the conventional cricket you don't do that. You wait for the loose ball. And when that loose ball comes, you try and hit that ball out for a 4 and a 6. It's a very similar concept in investing. You need to have a lot of patience. Good ideas don't come that often. So when you do get a good idea, you want to put meaningful amount of money to work, and then you want to see that money ride out for a long period of time. So you have to have the patience to wait for that idea, and then you have to have the patience to hold on to that idea. The third characteristic, which is very important, is discipline. There are 3,000 listed companies. There are innumerable sectors. There's IT, pharma, oil and gas, banking. Nobody can possibly be an expert at all of these. So it's important to stay within your circle of competence, your circle of knowledge. Because the minute you step out of that circle of competence is when you tend to make a lot of mistakes. So knowing what you don't know is also equally important. Not well phrased, but very extremely important. So being contrarian, being patient, being disciplined. Humility is also an extremely important characteristic when it comes to the field of investing. We all make mistakes, and certainly I've made tons of mistakes in the investment process. But where you need humility is to recognize that you've made a mistake and to move on. Most of us find it difficult. Typically, when you make a mistake, you start trying to find data and information which supports your hypothesis, and you ignore the stuff which goes against it. This is not a business where people associate this business with making money, which is true, but it's equally a business about minimizing your losses. So when you make a mistake, you must have the humility to say that, no, I've got this wrong. Let me get out of it as intact as I can. So plenty of stocks we have bought at 100, which went to a 50. We scrambled to support a hypothesis. 50 went to 20, which went to 5, which went to 0. So we didn't have the humility to realize it. And last 16 years, you develop humility over a period of time. The more mistakes you make, the more you get kicked around, the more humility you tend to develop. I'll just go back to the point of being contrarian because I think it's an important one. This is the only market in the world where people are excited, the stock market that is. People are excited when prices go up and dejected when prices go down. There's no other market like this, right? Somebody tells you laptop 25% off, everybody's scrambling for the Flipkart sale and the Amazon sale and all the other sales that are out there. 20% off, you all want to buy. Stock market, 20% off, nobody wants to buy. So it's important to have an independent mindset, to have these other characteristics. And the topic here is why people, not just smart people, but people in general, why they fail at investing. And one of the reasons that smart people fail is they don't have some of these characteristics as much. Humility is not associated with intelligence. Being contrarian is not associated with intelligence. So why do people fail at investing? The biggest reason that people fail is they don't do enough of hard work and effort. It's amazing. Before you buy a new iPhone, people do so much research. You try and figure out screen resolution, phone in the back, phone in the front, etc., etc. Before buying a stock, people do almost no research. All you need to do is have your uncle or your friend say, listen, I heard it's stock, great stock. That's all you need before you go out and buy. That's a 70,000 rupee investment versus a several lakh rupee or even larger than that investment. So people don't do enough of work. Most people tend to be overactive. People are always trying to time the market. Especially people who are incredibly smart think they can outsmart the market. So you get in when times are tough. Sorry, the other way around. You hopefully get in when times are tough and you get out when times are good, and you constantly try and time the process. In reality, timing the market is incredibly hard. There was a study which was done in the US from 1963 to 1993, 30 years. If you missed 1.2% of trading days, which means on average in a year you missed out on 4 days, your return drops by 95%. So activity doesn't pay off. You want to remain invested, you want to be patient. A lot of people try and do too many things, especially people who are very smart. They don't realize their boundaries and their limitations. And when you expand your boundaries and you try and do too many things, you tend to make more mistakes over a period of time. Overconfidence. Another thing which leads to a lot of mistakes in the investment business. And finally, in general, I find that people are quite greedy when they come to the stock market, and therefore they tend to take much more risk than they ought to. So what is the point of all of this? Let me just summarize it before I get to the final bit. Investing is a fabulous job. It's very interesting. And it's incredible because it's not about smarts. Today there is so much attention on being intelligent. Parents are worried about whether their kids are smart enough. Kids are worried about whether they're smarter than their peers in their school or peers in other schools. But here is a profession which is supposed to be analytically driven, which is supposed to be mathematically inclined. And yet it is not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being the person with the best temperament and the best character. And the beauty of all of this is, BIS is a school which encourages this. BIS is a school which helps you think independently, which develops your character. So I'd like to just end it by saying I think BIS has contributed a lot, certainly to my character development, and I think that's helped me a lot in my profession. So thank you very much for your time and attention. I've heard wrap up a few times, so I'm going to get out of your way. Thank you again.
Thank you, Chirag. We'll take questions as soon as he emerges from the other side. Questions for Chirag. Go ahead, please. Yeah, at the back.
Yeah, so throughout
Yeah, so let me answer that. Sorry, you want to add to that? So there is a conventional definition of what is smart, right? People who are analytically gifted, who have an easy ability to sort of grasp numbers, things of that sort. And my point is it's not that you have to be dumb in this business to do well. It's just that it's not about only intelligence. There's a lot more in most fields to be successful than just being smart. Now, I think that's more apparent when you look at things which are more creative in nature, more entrepreneurial in nature. You realize you need a risk-taking capability, you need a creative flair, but it's very often missed in the field of finance because it's associated with people suited and booted who typically come across as very smart. They want you to think they're very smart. They talk very glibly, they talk about macro things, they try and confuse you all the time. So my point was, being smart certainly is useful. It's helpful to have. But there's a lot more to it than just being smart. That was the only point I was trying to make. I was worried there were going to be no questions.
Yeah, so you spoke about not necessarily requiring math for investing, but then what about, so I don't know that much about investing, but what about models like the Black-Scholes model, which claim to be able to predict which stocks can do well, how you can pick a basket?
Sure.
And what about using that for investing and using math that way? Is that of any value?
So let me answer it in a different way. In the late 90s, there was a company called LTCM, Long-Term Capital Management. It had some incredibly smart people there. It had 2 Nobel laureates. So you could not get a better set of more conventionally intelligent people. And yet, they failed dramatically. They failed dramatically for 2 reasons. One, they were incredibly overconfident. And they were following, and in fact, Mr. Black and Mr. Scholes were the 2 Nobel laureates we're talking about. And the reason they failed is they were incredibly overconfident. So instead of investing 1 rupee in what they thought was a great idea, they went out and borrowed 9 rupees against that 1 rupee and decided, we are so certain about what we're doing, let us invest 10 rupees. One of the big reasons they failed. The other big reason they failed is they took a very bookish approach, a very academic approach to the investment process. They said, this has not happened in the last 50 years, it's not going to happen in the next 50. But as we've seen, certainly in the last 1 month, things which we never would have anticipated ever to happen have happened all very quickly. So yes, if you're doing a certain type of investing, which is sort of what they call quantitative investing, right? So if you're a quant investor, you need to have incredible mathematical skills. But that's a very small part of investing. Most people, when they look at investing, it's investing about stock. It's much more about common sense. Buy when other people are selling. Stick to what you understand. Common sense is one of the most uncommon things I have found in the field of investing.
what is the difference between trading and investment?
So trading is it's essentially driven by time horizon. So a trader typically holds on to a stock for a very short period of time. You buy today, you sell it 3 months, 6 months, 12 months later. India is particularly unique. People buy in the morning, sell in the afternoon. They're trying to make a quick buck. So you're not trying to make outsized returns. You're not trying to make 500% or 10,000%. You're trying to make 1%, 2% very quickly and keep doing that again and again and again and again in an effort to make money over a period of time. The investor is somebody who looks at a much longer time horizon. So you want to invest for 3 years, 5 years. So one of the questions I get asked very often when making presentations to investors is, what is the right time horizon? So some of you may have heard of Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett says your time horizon should be indefinite. Right? So you should actually have a 40-year, 50-year time horizon. But by the time I tell most investors invest for 30, 40, 50 years, I can tell they've lost total interest. But I think 3, 5 years, that kind of investing is investing.
Chirag, thank you for making the link between contrarian and the kind of critical thinking, independent thinking that that good schools like BIS provide. The one criticism that has been made of your industry is, in fact, that the industry itself chases momentum, and it's not contrarian enough, and that very few funds are contrarian, including those who call themselves contra funds. So how would you respond to that?
So it's a slightly different answer to your question, but the more momentum investors I meet, the more people I meet who are following the crowd, I don't thank them overtly, but I thank them internally. Because we want that kind of behavior. For me, for somebody like me who's hopefully conservative, who's hopefully contrarian in nature, I need people on the other side who are behaving irrationally. The typical retail investor means an individual investor. The typical individual investor is momentum driven. There are a lot of institutional investors as well who are momentum driven. And the more momentum driven investors that are out there, there is more stupidity, and therefore there is a greater advantage to take off those types of people. So yes, we all speak the same language. So you'll find few investors who will tell you, oh, I'm momentum driven. Everybody will tell you, I'm value focused, I'm really smart, I look for the long term. But then you've got to look at their portfolios. So I've met managers who say, I'm a really long term focused guy. And then I look at their portfolios, and the portfolio's got a turnover of 200%. They're holding stocks for 6 months or 3 months. So, we all want to speak the same language. We all want to appear really smart. But I think the proof of the pudding is you've got to see how people have performed over 10 years, 15 years. How what they're saying and what they believe, do you see that in their portfolios? Do you see that in their personal lives? So I think it's true. A lot of people talk the talk but don't walk the walk. And I think that's good news for us, for those who do.
What role does luck play in investing?
Very important. Between the 3 factors, intelligence, good character, and luck, I would give incredible weightage to luck. We forget, we buy so many stocks, they do well over a period of time. Very often, you start out with a hypothesis which is very different to what finally plays out. I've given you this Infosys example. It's interesting, I read a report which came out in 1988, about 15 years ago. At that time, the reason people were buying into Infosys was it was a product company. They didn't have a services business at all. It was all driven by products. And this transformed over a period of time. It actually turned out to be a services company. They dished products. They managed that transition extremely well. So luck is an incredibly important part of this business. We forget it. But the problem is luck is not as simple as just lightning striking you or not striking you. You've got to also position yourself a little bit to be in a lucky environment. So you can't just go out there and say, I'm just going to buy a bunch of stocks and pray to God that I'm going to be lucky. It's unfortunately not that easy. So I think you've created a little bit of your own luck, but luck plays a very, very important part of this business. And a lot of people don't give it enough of attribute and enough of weightage. It's very important.
Thank you, Chirag.
Okay, thank you very much.